plan this crisis, but frankly, how we're taking care of and supporting and frankly generating wealth for our communities. BPS has been working hand in hand with a group of BIPOC community advocates whom we know as the Build Shift Collective. This group together has been identifying priorities and goals that are essential to centering as we start to think about policy changes regarding buildings at the city level. I've been impressed with Build Shift's collective thoughtfulness and the key results identified as hard standards that will guide our work. We need healthy living spaces for all, equitable access to energy, anti-displacement strategies, resilience to increasingly extreme and unpredictable weather, and temperature controls that keep everyone safe in disasters. Some of you may be wondering, won't this add cost to Portland's business community at a particularly bad time? And yeah, we understand cost will be a primary concern for building owners, but we intend to design a policy with this in mind. BPS staff will get into the details throughout this process. We are proposing a concept that is designed to allow buildings to choose the most cost-effective pathways to meet the targets. We're looking for a concept that is designed to phase in over a long period of time, allowing for long-range planning and leveraging existing capital improvement plans. The city intends to collaborate with the private and nonprofit sectors to find and expand resources too, such as the Energy Trust of Oregon, looking for ways to help offset the cost of policy compliance. The city is also exploring the use of federal infrastructure dollars and state programs. And I want to acknowledge that the Portland Clean Energy Fund may be an option, providing resources to community-led projects that upgrade rental apartments to meet the new standards. The city is committed to seeking out and expanding resources creatively, but we can't do it alone. We'll be asking building owners to do their part and looking at all of you here today to think about how those solutions are realized. We look forward to working with all stakeholders to create a comprehensive, effective, just, and fair ordinance together. I want to thank everyone again for your time, and I'll hand it back over to Irene. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Donnie. Okay, so I'm going to go a little off script and just ask everybody to take one big deep breath. I know everyone, there's lots of things going on in the world. There's lots of things probably going on in our personal lives and our work lives. So you can all take a couple deep breaths and kind of center yourselves in this space. That'd be great. Thank you. I'm doing it myself. Okay, so I hope that you all are ready to do some big thinking, because that's what we're here to do. The climate and health standards policy that we'll be talking about today and in our and a couple of succeeding meetings will influence the health and safety and carbon emissions of Portland's multifamily and commercial buildings over the next generation. So I'd like to start by asking you all to sort of imagine out about 30 years from now to 2050, right? What do you see? I'd like you to hold those people, places, and things that you see when you think about the future, and keep them in mind as we talk about the climate and health standards policy today and over a couple meetings over the next couple of weeks. Because the work that we're doing here in this room is it's as much about the 30 years from now as it is about today. So yeah. So this policy is about planning, preparing so that 30 years from now, our multifamily and commercial buildings are not just climate ready, zero carbon emissions, but they're also healthy and safe places to live and work. So you all are here today to provide input into this policy. We're asking you to speak to your values, your vision, your questions, and your expertise. Just to give you a sense of what we have coming up for you over the next weeks to months, we'll have 4, possibly five work sessions together. These sessions will cover the details of the policy implementation, the resources, financial and technical, that can support improvements to buildings. And then also, how do we do this work equitably? There is also a buildings working group that includes representatives from environmental organizations, building owners, affordable housing developers, large institutions, utility providers, and more. And the building working group is met for the first time last week at the same time as now, with about 45 people in attendance. And this group will also be meeting about four times, possibly 5 times, and providing input on some key policy areas, just as you will as well. So I just wanted to flag that for you all, that there will be building working group meetings and tenant working group meetings, and sort of staggered right after each other. So the topics of these meetings will be based in part on the city's questions for you, but also on the subjects that you tell us are important to you as well. So we are very much looking forward to hearing from you all to kind of finalize the details of the policy. And you can expect to hear more of that from us in the next week or so. So with all of that, let's turn back to today and focus on kind of learning more about this this project, this policy development process, and what we have teed up for you today. So I'm going to put the agenda in the chat here. So we'd like to go over some welcome and introductions. We'll learn about the climate and health standards. We have BPS staff and build shift staff who will provide some information about the policy development. We'll take a quick break and then we'll do a very short kind of values exercise, an interactive exercise, and then we'll spend about an hour doing a small group discussion. We'll talk about sort of your experiences, and your experiences with your community and priorities related to climate change and building standards. And then we'll try to wrap up and get you out of here, go over some next steps in the last 5 minutes or so. Okay, so any questions about that? And feel free to use the chat box to at any time to share any questions, and I'll make sure that we cover those. Okay, so to start, I'd like to go over some introductions first. So actually, sorry, before I do that, I just want to go over some quick housekeeping around Zoom. So I know we've been doing this for over 2 years now, so you all are probably very used to this. But just to cover our bases here, we'd like you to stay muted unless we're going into discussion group or doing Q&A. Again, you're welcome to use the chat box to provide any comments or say hello to anybody or provide any questions. You can hide yourself using the 3 dots to minimize, any, like, if it feels to overload with a bunch of people in the room, you can do that. You can also put yourself on do not disturb as well. We encourage you to ask, sorry. And then also Wing here is available for any technical support. So just flag us if you need any, if you're having any issues with tech. Okay, so with that, I will now turn it over to Vinh to introduce himself and also introduce the resource team here as well.
All right, thank you, Irene. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. We really appreciate your giving some time to the process that we're in right now with really refining a policy concept that I'll describe a little bit later. But I did want to share just a real quick intro to myself. So I'm Senior Climate Policy Advisor at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I've been working at the city for since 2007. More on me later, though. I just wanted to let everybody know that we have a group of stakeholders here, and we also have a city resource team who are stakeholders as well as folks we can ask questions to. So those are folks that work with me, the Portland Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, or BPS. There's also the Bureau of Development Services represented here and the Portland Housing Bureau. I think we also have Commissioner Rubio's office here, and Energy Trust of Oregon, Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, the Institute for Market Transformation, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and then the utilities, Northwest Natural, Pacific Power, PG. I wanted to thank you all for being part of the city resource team. And we'll get into the individual introductions next. So I'll hand it back to Irene.
Okay, thank you. So I know there's a big group here, but we want to give everybody an opportunity to introduce themselves and to the folks in the room. So we'll start with, I'm going to just kind of go in order of who's on my screen here. So I'd like you to just say your name, your pronouns, and who you're affiliated with. And since we have a lot of folks in the room today, if you can keep it short, maybe less than 20 seconds, that'd be awesome. If you don't want to introduce yourself, that's fine. Just feel free to opt out, or you can also just use the chat box as well. Okay, so I'm gonna go in order here. And I'll start with Christina Dirks, and then Greer Ryan is up next. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Christina Dirks. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a policy and program coordinator with the Rental Services Office at the Portland Housing Bureau. Nice to see you all.
Go ahead, Greer.
Hi, everybody. I'm Greer Ryan. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Clean Buildings Policy Manager for Climate Solutions, which is a regional nonprofit that spans Washington and Oregon. Great to be here.
Okay, thanks. Erica from Air Health. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Erica Moseson. I'm a pulmonary and critical care medicine doctor in the Portland metro area and the founder of Air Health, Our Health.
Adele.
Hello, I'm Adele Thompson, and I'm with the climate team that's part of Metropolitan Alliance for Common Good, MACG. And a long time ago, that was known as the Portland Organizing Project. It's an organization made up of organizations, community organizing, a community organizing method. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Suzanne.
Hi, did I successfully unmute? I guess I did. My name is Suzanne. I coordinate the Allies for a Healthier Oregon program at the nonprofit We Can Do Better, which is a health equity convening organization, community advocates and policymakers coming together for conversation and discussion.
Great. Bob Gravely, and then Mike Stars.
Yeah, hi, Bob. I am a local regional business manager for Pacific Power in Portland. I use he, him pronouns. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there. Yeah, Mike Saris. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a senior program manager at the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, and I lead two studies, the residential building stock assessment and the commercial building stock assessment.
Great. Andrew Spear and then David Heslem.
Hi, good afternoon. Andrew Spear. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm with PGE, and I'm the local government affairs manager that covers Multnomah County for the company.
And my name is David Heslem. I'm the executive director at Earth Advantage, a local green building on the residential side, nonprofit. And then I'm a policy co-chair for the Zero Coalition, coalition of groups working on decarbonization policies here in Oregon.
Great. Thank you.
He, him pronouns. Thanks.
Thank you. Beth Benton and then Marley Klaas.
Hi, I'm Beth Benton. I am the Property Compliance Division Manager with the Bureau of Development Services with the City of Portland.
Hi, everyone. Marley Klaas. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a policy associate at the Northwest Energy Coalition and also part of the Build Shift group.
Then Kate Wellington and then Diane Weisenhalter. And I apologize if I'm butchering people's names in advance.
Hi, my name is Kate Wellington. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a senior strategies manager at Energy Trust of Oregon.
Diane Meisenhelter. I use she or they as my pronouns, and I work both with NAACP Environmental Justice as well as Extinction Rebellion PDX.
Great, thank you. Jonah Davis and then Adrian Arenas.
Hi, my name is Jonna Davis. I use she, her pronouns. I work for the Northeast Coalition of Neighborhoods, and I'm on the Build Shift Collective team.
Hello, everyone. My name is Adrian. I use he, him pronouns. I'm Latino Build's Green Program Manager. We are a regional nonprofit organization. We assist Latino-owned construction contractors in a number of services. We are interested in social equity policy as well as green building policy. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Amy Cortez and then Jay Raj Singh.
Hi, my name is Amy Cortez, she, her pronouns. I work for New Buildings Institute, which is a national nonprofit organization that works to make buildings better for people and the environment. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jay Raj Singh. I use they and he pronouns. I'm the Climate Resilience and Environmental Justice Director with Unite Oregon.
Thank you. Lanny Ralph, and then go to Bob Greeley.
Hello, Lainey Ralph, she, her pronouns. I work on the energy efficiency programs for Northwest Natural, and I'm currently backfilling for low-income weatherization programs.
Sorry, Bob. I had a mix up with my screen here. I already introduced myself. All right, Jordan Salcido.
Hi, my name is Jordan Salcido. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Environmental Justice Fellow with Coalition of Communities of Color.
Great, thank you. We'll go to Kim McCarty and then Anjanette Brown.
Hello, I'm Kim McCarty, she, her pronouns. I'm the Executive Director at the Community Alliance of Tenants.
Irene, you were muted.
Oh, sorry about that. Anjanette, do you want to introduce yourself? I see you've introduced yourself in the chat, so you can opt out if you'd like, and you can move on.
Yeah, please go ahead. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Maria Velez, and then we'll go to Mustafa.
Hello, everybody. My name is Maria Velez. I'm a director at Latino Network, and we provide education, extended day education, and wraparound services for students and families. Oh, I'm sorry, she, her pronouns.
I think Mustafa also introduced himself.
Yeah, Mustafa. Sure, thank you. Appreciate being here. I believe I was invited by Build Shift, so appreciate that invitation. And my name is Mustafa Finney. I use he, him pronouns. I am one of two project coordinators for East Portland Resilience Coalition. It's a coalition of about 20 different organizations, all working towards green infrastructure, green economy, green workforce, green agriculture. And our first grant was a $100,000 planning grant from PSEF. And so we are almost done with that grant and moving into the next phase. So glad to be here.
Great, thank you. We'll go to Jeremy Hart and then Precious.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Jeremy. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Environmental Justice Fellow with APANO, or Asian Pacific American Network of Oregon.
Hi, everyone. My name is Precious Rideout. I use she, her pronouns. I'm Associate Director of Community Engagement for the Institute of Market Transformation, IMT.
Great, thank you. We'll go to Derek and then Koya.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Derek Thompson. I'm the co-director of Leaders Become Legends, also part of the Build Shift program, or collective, I should say.
Hello, I'm Koya. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Metro Organizer with Community Alliance of Tenants.
Great, thank you. And then I think last but not least, Julian.
Hi, everybody. I'm Julian Hanlon Austin, he, him pronouns, and I am Commissioner Rubio's Community Engagement Coordinator.
Great, thank you. I think we have one more person that just joined, Samantha Hernandez. Do you want to introduce yourself? We're just sharing names, pronouns, and your affiliation, please.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Samantha, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm a climate justice organizer at the Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility.
Great. Thank you so much for all those introductions. Hopefully I didn't miss anybody, and if I did, please, you can put it in the chat or just flag me with your reactions at the bottom of your Zoom screen there. Okay, great. So we're gonna spend about the next 45 minutes going over a presentation that Vinh has for you, and also Nikita from BuildShift. So I will tee you up, Vinh. You have the mic.
All right, thank you. Too many things open to navigate. Here we go. How does that look?
That looks great.
All right. Now it's great to go through the introductions and see so many familiar faces and some new folks I haven't met yet. Looking forward to getting to know new folks too. So thanks again for being here, everyone. I just want to share a little bit more about who I am, and then also hand the mic to Nikita for a second to introduce herself. So again, Vinh Mason. I mentioned I work for the city. I use he, him pronouns. I'm mixed race, Asian and white, and my ethnic heritage is Vietnamese and Shenandoah. And I'll be sharing some more about the policy concept in a minute here, but I'm also a member of the BuildShift team that we developed this policy concept with since 2019. So with that, I'll hand it to Nikita to introduce herself.
Thanks, Vinh. Hey, everyone. My name is Nikita Daryanani. I'm the Climate and Energy Policy Manager at the Coalition of Communities of Color. We've been working in partnership to coordinate the BuildShift Collective over the past couple of years, and I'm also part of the BuildShift team. Really excited to be here.
Thank you, Nikita. All right, I'll jump into the presentation here. So initially, we'll cover some background on kind of a high-level worldview of climate change, bring that kind of home to Oregon, and then some background on why we started to center, as we referring to BPS, why we started to center Black and Brown communities in the early phases of policy decision-making. And then I'll hand it to Nikita to share some of that process with the BuildShift community organizing. And then I'll wrap this up with a bit of the policy concept and where the next steps are going. And then we'll have some discussion groups to hear from you all. All right, so let's see if this works. I have to close my chat window. Okay. Yeah, so worldview, some of you have probably heard that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change at the United Nations, or IPCC, has released their sixth assessment report on February 28th of this year. And a couple of key points in that 3,765-page summary document, or it looks similar to previous reports. So that we have human-induced climate change leading to extreme weather, and it's happening more frequently. So an example of that would be what happened last week when it just started snowing in April for the first time. Measurable snow, in some cases up to 5 inches around town. And then the other thing that has been very clear is across the world, our most vulnerable populations are disproportionately affected. And I think that's true. There are folks on the front lines of climate change in Portland too. Like, it's not just the worldview, are most vulnerable. The thing that is new to me within the sixth assessment report is this last bullet here, that the impacts of climate change to natural and human systems are now irreversible, and they're pushed beyond their ability to adapt. So when I understand that, I think of that we can no longer just focus on resilience, that we really need to drive down our carbon emissions across the world. I want to bring it home to Oregon a bit. So the IPCC is made up of over 1,000 scientists doing research related to climate change. Similarly, in Oregon, we have the Oregon Climate Change Research Institute, made up of over 100 Oregon scientists doing research, a lot of them represented in the IPCC. And here's what they are letting policymakers within Portland know: that we need to plan for heavier winter storms, impacts on tribal cultural resources like first foods, increasing wildfire frequency and size, as we started to experience in September 2020, and then more hotter days and longer heat waves, like the heat dome that we all went through. If you were here last June, that we went through together. So that heat dome is to show a display of kind of how extreme it was. I'm referring to the Multnomah County report that came out here. I encourage you all to take a look at this. But here's a graph from that report that shows the daily maximum temperature for as long as we have records in Portland. So you can see, like in summertime, June, July, August, we have our higher temperatures, and the previous record was at 107 degrees. June 26th last summer, we broke that record at 108 degrees. The next day, it jumped to 112 degrees. And then on June 28th, we blew the record out of the water at 116 degrees. To give you some context for that, the record in Las Vegas is 117 degrees. But Las Vegas is accustomed to really hot summers. We're not accustomed to that here. Where a quarter of our rental housing, for instance, does not have access to cooling. So the result of that is a lot of heat stress, and then over 60 folks died from heat stress in Multnomah County. That scale of heat wave and death is comparable to the 1995 Chicago heat wave, where over 200 people died. Chicago's a much bigger city, though, too. So that Chicago heat wave is often referred to as one of the top 10 worst on record across the world. So it's not just the maximum temperature, which I believe is out at the airport, where there is some green space around there. It's also the distribution of temperature across the city, because there is an effect called the urban heat island effect, where paved surfaces that are darker in color absorb the sunlight and then re-emit that as heat throughout, especially the afternoon and evening hours. So this is a map across Portland that is showing the distribution of heat on a warm summer afternoon. This is we got this data working with Vivek Shandas, a PSU professor. And we mapped it here to show that in areas where there is a lot of green infrastructure, the temperatures are much lower. So looking on the left here around Goose Hollow, have a major intersection of two freeways with Highway 26 and Interstate 405, but they are also surrounded by green spaces, and the neighborhoods around there are flush with trees. So on the map here, you might be able to see me scroll here. This is the area I'm talking about, where the blue and green colors are showing the lower temperature at the same time of day as the other parts of the city. So like East Portland, where we have a lot more paved areas. This happens to be a City of Portland emergency management facility. And there's a lot of paved areas there that are collecting heat. So the temperatures here can be much higher. For instance, Dr. Shandas measured a temperature during that June 28th peak at 122 degrees in the afternoon at Lentz. And that was in the earlier side of the afternoon. By evening, it could have actually been much warmer. So that's the red areas, for instance. And that difference, the temperature differential in terms of Fahrenheit is about 20 degrees difference. So although we might say 118 degrees at the airport, it could actually be like at 110 degrees in neighborhoods. Like I'm looking at Irvington, for instance, right now, and then 100 and the upper 120s in neighborhoods like Lentz. So to address this, one thing we need to do is to figure out how to be more resilient to the heat. But the other thing is we need to start reducing our carbon emissions. So that goes back to that UN report that just came out, that we can't simply just try to adapt. So we do track our carbon emissions, BPS tracks for the city annually. And the blue line here is the United States, and the red line is Multnomah County. We track them at the county level on our joint climate action planning. So we saw rising emissions between the city and the US. Similarly, from 1990 to 2000. In 2001, we started a local action plan on global warming, and that helped. Despite population growth, our emissions started to go down, as you can kind of see here in the red line, starting to dip towards 2010. And we received a lot of accolades for that, even internationally, because we were doing something different than the United States as a whole. And then you see that from the last decade, from about 2012 to our current time, our emissions have not continued to go down. We call it a plateau. We've hit a plateau where the growth of population, although we might be having more fuel-efficient cars entering into the market, and programs like the Energy Trust incentives that are driving down energy use, which also reduces carbon emissions. We have the utilities increasing the renewable energy supply. Despite all that, with population growth, we are plateauing. In fact, for commercial buildings, the emissions have increased 16% over the last decade. So when we think about strategies of where can we reduce emissions, we look at the different sectors where emissions come from. I'm referring to carbon emissions, but carbon emissions also generally mean greenhouse gas emissions that contribute to climate change. So most of our emissions are from buildings. This is kind of newer. This is the first time in the 15 years I've been at the city where I've seen the buildings emissions exceed the transportation emissions. This is in 2019, in 2020, and 2021. With the pandemic, we expect the building emissions to have an even larger part of the pie. So we have disaggregated the building emissions. So prior to a model that we developed with Architecture 2030, we only had high-level utility data on an annual basis. So we created a ground-up model of all the buildings in Portland, what the emissions, where the emissions are coming from. So in the commercial sector that I mentioned earlier, half of our building emissions are coming from the commercial sector. Most of that coming from the 1,000 largest buildings in Portland that currently report annual energy use and carbon emissions to the city as part of a disclosure, energy use and disclosure law that we have that's been in place since 2015. Another sector that we generally looked at before is residential. We're able to disaggregate by multifamily and single family residential. So you can see here, multifamily is about a third of the pie. A small wedge of that is regulated affordable housing. A very large part of that is the rental market. And then there is a smaller section here of multifamily condominiums too. So owner occupied multifamily housing. And then single family housing is also about a third. I guess I should say multifamily is about a quarter, and then single family is about a third of the emissions. And for the work that we're looking at today and continuing for the next couple of months, we have a policy concept that focuses, that does not include single family residential, and instead focuses on the multifamily and commercial sectors. So we think ahead to what is it that we're hoping to see by 2050, because the city does have a goal to be 100% renewable in terms of energy by 2050. We also have a zero carbon emissions goal. So going back to that curve that I mentioned earlier, I want to just do that for a second. Whoop, it's all going one direction now. Let me see. There we go. Yeah, so our emissions compared to 1990 levels are down about close to 20% below 1990 levels. Our 2030 goal is to be at 50%. So we really need to drive down our emissions to make a difference. We need the other cities in the world to do as well. And so, but our 2050 goal is to drop another 80% to zero emissions. So an example of what that looks like on a building level is the June Key Delta Community Center at the intersection of Albina and Ainsworth across from Peninsula Park. This was a former gas station and auto garage that the Deltas, a Black sorority, decided, let's turn this into a community center. And when they did that, they decided, let's seek the highest level of green building that's out there, living building challenge. And to reach that challenge, and one of the key aspects is to have net zero energy over the course of a year. So there's solar panels that you're seeing the backside here. Actually, they produce more energy than the building consumes over the course of the year. So this is an example of the types of buildings that we'd like to see by 2050 across Portland to reach those carbon targets and really put the brakes on climate change. All right, and it's not just about buildings. If you've been to this community center, you know what amazing and wonderful things happen there, including the work of BuildShift. And I will just share a couple more background slides here and turn it over to Nikita to share some of that work there. Okay, so about 2017, what I started to see after working for the Bureau for 10 years is a shift towards climate justice. So this is about fossil fuels in generally, but also about the impacts of climate change. I've been here in Portland since 1994, and I've gone to a lot of Earth Day marches. Earth Day is like 2 days away, many of those, and mostly white-led and wonderful folks that I've marched with and had a good time in celebrating the Earth with. And but what I saw in 2017 was a shift in where the leadership was coming from. Much more diversity, culturally specific community-based organizations leading that work, and the emergence of climate justice as a new expertise in Portland that isn't just about buildings and energy and technology, but really about people and considering the impacts, especially on our Black and Brown communities. So when we were doing our climate action planning and this was emerging, we did have an equity working group in 2015 that I was part of, and that included 5 community-based organizations representing different races in Portland. And we did some interesting work, I think, there on equity, where we reviewed 171 actions that were drafted and considered which ones have equity implications, and that helped the city prioritize which actions to start with. A lot of those actions were already in play, though, and one thing that a key takeaway that I had from that process was hearing back from the organizations that are involved that they would really like to be involved at the beginning of a planning process or a policy development process, not towards the end to do a review. So we really heard that, and at the same time, the city was working on a kind of our own climate justice work internally, which was called the Spectrum of Community Engagement to Ownership. We were working with a consultant called Movement Strategy Center out of Oakland. I was working with 3 other cities on a pilot project that eventually resulted in this tool that is now used nationally to guide community engagement for cities that are working on climate work. And so we thought we were in the climate action plan and equity working group process, like, wow, we did well. We involved communities of color through this equity working group, and we elevated voices, and Movement Strategy Center said, no, not really. You actually consulted towards the end of a process, or even maybe the middle to end of the process. And we would call that tokenization. And the folks, including myself, they were like, whoa, that's not what we want to do. I'm a person of color, like tokenization, that's terrible, right? And so I was looking for an opportunity to really like, is there a project coming along where we can move the needle here all the way to the right and work in collaboration with communities, and also defer to them to gain community ownership of the process itself. So that's what I'll describe a bit of, and then turn it over to Nikita. So we called that was the Zero Cities Project. There's funding through the Urban Sustainability Directors Network for 12 cities to participate initially. That are listed on the right here. And that funding wasn't for city staff. That funding was technical assistance for the partners on the left. And notice the Movement Strategy Center is also elevating to the national stage here of consultation. And then they recommended that we work with 5 organizations in town that were leading on climate justice at that time. And so those were Verde, APANO, as mentioned earlier, the Asian Pacific American Network of Oregon, the Coalition of Communities of Color, Opal Environmental Justice, Portland African American Leadership Forum, now known as Imagine Black, and the Native American Youth and Family Association, which NAYA did not choose to participate at that time, but was involved in a climate justice collaborative with the other organizations. So we moved forward under Verde's leadership to have a new model for community-led engagement. Another equity consultant that we worked with in this project was the the Race Forward out of New York, and they provided a guidance document of some issues to consider at the intersection of advancing racial equity as one goal and the other goal of reducing carbon emissions. So what really kind of rose to our engagement with through Build Shift and the Zero Cities project was really thinking about displacement. How can we prevent displacement with this? And we thought about the energy bills. If we can reduce that winter heating bill, for instance, then that might actually help out folks in their decision-making not to move. And of course, displacement of folks, particularly Black and Brown folks, can lead to entire gentrification of neighborhoods. So other areas that related to displacement are economic prosperity, thinking of wealth building and job creation, workforce development. And then we looked at this lightly at the beginning and then went deeper into it, as Nikita will describe, it's substandard housing and the health risk associated. And that will come up today, and I appreciate seeing a lot of health organizations here today that we haven't engaged with previously. So welcome and thank you. I mentioned the urban heat island effects. And then overall, that the idea was to have community-led engagement rather than have the city leading the engagement. So this is an example of what the city might normally do. That is, I think, good for the beginning of a conversation. So this is a map that we used American Community Survey data to look at energy cost burden. So that's the percent of bills, percent of income spent on energy bills. The areas in red are 6% and higher. So that's considered energy burden, where it's a significant impact on folks within these census tracts is how it's organized, but it's kind of by neighborhood too, as you can see, where the energy burden is so high, it's impacting folks spending in other places too, and that can lead to displacement. So this is based on kind of previous data. Whenever we do mapping exercises like this, we're getting data that's already 2 or 3 years outdated. And then we map it, and it's interesting. It starts a conversation, but what we're missing from this is lived experience, particularly around like this is annual kind of percent of energy cost burden, but really it's the monthly winter heating bill that can really have a huge impact on folks because it's so variable. So with that, I'll turn it over to Nikita about how we tried to learn more about lived experience and see that as just as important as the more kind of technical data.
Yeah, thanks, Vinh. So first I'll talk a little bit about Build Shift. So we've mentioned this name a few times during this call. So I work with CCC. As I mentioned, we're an organization that's been working in partnership with the city and Verde to coordinate the collective, and we're also part of it. So Build Shift is a group of BIPOC community leaders working to build community and shift power. We seek to build community across the Portland metro area, share knowledge and community wisdom, and shift political power to Black and Brown folks through leadership development and participatory policy making, which Vinh talked about in regards to like community engagement and how it should start from the ground up when developing policy. So this group formed a couple of years ago and has been doing shared learning and capacity building around buildings and energy with a focus on racial justice and climate justice since then. Can go on to the next slide. So Build Shift has led several workshops and convenings bringing together Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So the first was a community forum on buildings and energy in December 2019 at the June Key Delta Center that Vinh talked about. And this photo is from that, where folks discussed concerns around renters' rights and energy and housing and how energy interacts with people's lives and our homes. The group also hosted a virtual community workshops in 2020, and these focused on some of the compounding crises that were facing the community at the time. So this was including the pandemic, police brutality, and racial justice protests and the wildfires, sort of responding to community needs and wanting to build community around these compounding crises at the time. And then we the group returned to our focus on energy. So we held a virtual workshop in March of last year, 2021. And this one focused on energy burden, where participants shared their experiences with paying energy bills, the stress of energy burden, the types of choices that people had to make in order to pay their bills and be comfortable in their homes. And we'll share some of the findings from this workshop in the next ones in a couple slides. We used the information that we gathered here in March and continued to meet and discuss. And then we hosted a 2-part policy convening in July of 2021. And so this was just a few weeks after the historic heat dome. So we talked a lot about the heat wave, as you can imagine. That was really front of people's minds at the time. And we talked about their experience. So folks shared just really some really harrowing stories about how they dealt with the heat wave and sort of decisions they had to make to take care of themselves and their loved ones, how many people didn't have access to ACs, and how important this was to folks. Many participants were renters, so we also got to hear firsthand about how they manage the deadly temperatures as renters and some of the barriers that they have to having a home that's healthy. And we also talked about the personal and community values that we wanted a policy to hold, which, yeah. Here is a word cloud, which will also be kind of coming back to and doing our own in a bit. This is a word cloud where we collected the values from participants at the workshop. So as you can see, justice, safety, empathy, health, family, community, environment, equity, sustainability, education are really front of mind for participants. And these are the values that we're carrying with us throughout this whole project and are at the heart of what we're trying to do. And so this has really been the guiding principles and the guiding values for our work together. And we hope that this will also frame sort of the work moving forward. The next slide. So through our workshops, we found that energy burden, sorry,
there it goes. Sorry about that.
So through our workshops, we found that energy burden for those who participated ranged from like 1.8% to 45% for one participant. And so as Vinh mentioned, this is the percentage of your income that's spent on energy bills. And so 6% is considered energy burdened. And so we provided folks with a tool at the meeting itself to calculate this. This was at the March Energy Cost Burden Workshop that we held. And we also provided information about utility programs and other resources and found that the majority of people who were there weren't aware of these resources, like they hadn't received outreach about them and did not know that they existed and they can use them. We learned about the family and social network obligations that folks have around finances that they have to plan for and consider each month when they're paying their bills and when they're budgeting. We found that the majority of people participating didn't feel comfortable interacting with their landlords if they needed something repaired or something fixed in their home or had an issue. They didn't feel comfortable. And so we've identified several policy priorities from this that also came from the workshop. So including setting minimum standards and upgrades for rentals, lowering utility bills and keeping rents stable when improvements are made in homes. That's something that folks are obviously very worried about. If something is upgraded or improved in their home, that rent won't be stable. Incentive opportunities for clean energy investments and avoiding placing further burdens on renters, more accessible energy assistance, more robust and accessible energy assistance to low income folks, and tenant right to know information about energy. So this is the type of energy that's being used in the home, energy costs, sort of as or before people are signing leases, so that they have that they can make really informed decisions about their rental, having this information beforehand. So all of these discussions and workshops and meetings with the team almost weekly over the year and all the convenings that we've held culminated in our proposal for what we call the HEART standards. So this stands for health, equitable energy, anti-displacement, resilience, and temperature. And this focuses on renters as we're thinking about who we want to ensure that that is benefiting from a policy. Our focus is on renters, and we're excited to be in this stage of developing this together. And yeah, so I'm really happy to be here with you all in this next phase of this process. And I'll pass it back to Vinh to talk a little bit more about these goals.
Thank you, Nikita, for sharing that background. This is really why we have taken a lot of time at Bureau of Planning and Sustainability to work on community engagement for the last 2 years, is really to understand what community priorities are, knowing that if we start with Black and Brown communities first, that the benefits will pass to all low-income communities. One thing we talk about at Build Shift, we say is no one's exempt from climate change. So although our discussions with community have been focused on rental housing, and by that I mean unregulated rental housing, we also need to consider all buildings. Because as you saw, the building sector, the commercial sector is very large portions, half of the emissions in Portland. And so we wanted to take aspects of the HEART standards and also look at across commercial and multifamily buildings. I'll come back to that in a minute here, looking at next steps, but to kind of share a little more about the standards that we're thinking of, because I'll share some examples from what we're seeing as a trend across the United States and what's called building performance standards. Those are very much focused on reducing carbon emissions to 0 by 2050, for instance, for our goal. But because we really met with our communities first, the intersecting issues with reducing carbon emissions or reducing fossil fuels include improving indoor air quality and health. So an example of that is when stoves are currently required to be ventilated. And so we know that with electric, but also natural gas stoves produce air pollutants. And without ventilation, there's a number of health issues like asthma and exacerbating cancer risk. And then within carbon emissions, there's many pathways to get there. And so there's reducing energy efficient or increasing energy efficiency. There's energy conservation, using less, renewable energy, and then looking beyond renewables. So we aren't just looking at getting carbon emissions to 0, but what's beyond 2050, and what's the quality of the energy that we are selecting for our buildings. So that could be including looking at the future of hydropower. And then we do have, I mentioned that 100% renewable energy goal. As part of that resolution, we have a community-based energy goal of 10% by 2050, which is very significant. So that's where an example that would be like community solar. So we'll get there and have more discussions around things like health and carbon emissions and where the strategies to reduce them. But I want to note that in the center of our heart is, as Nikita noted, is anti-displacement. So we need to consider, how does it reduce energy bills? How is it not increasing rent, but also how is it affecting the rental housing market? Because if we are reducing the amount of housing that's out there, that can also decrease affordability. And then related to some of the health issues is building resilience to the climate change impacts like wildfires. And as we've seen in California, power outages associated with that. And then for the heat dome, there are cities across the United States that have maximum indoor temperature limits for rental housing, including Phoenix and Dallas and Washington, D.C. So we have some of those examples to look at, and we'll talk about, is that applicable here to make some type of access to cooling available to renters. Okay, so I mentioned that across the nation, we've seen this kind of concept of building performance standards to reduce carbon emissions. So it's all across the US really. So currently there are laws in place in Boston, New York, Washington, DC, St. Louis, and Chula Vista, and Denver. And then there are states who develop these standards. Washington's had them for quite a bit, maybe 5 years now, but they're just now getting into implementation. Colorado and the state of Maryland and just recently established these types of standards. There is a wave nationally, though, of there's a coalition coordinated through the White House that Portland is partner in as well. And the cities that are listed here are highlighted in orange circles are all over 30 cities that are now committed to establishing standards that reduce carbon emissions, but also starting to look at what is the impacts on our Black and Brown communities. So in that regard, Portland is ahead of the game, but we're still in coalition with these other cities. So a lot of change happening across the U.S. It's not just here. The information I'm sharing is gathered and organized through the Institute for Market Transformation. That's one of the partners I noted earlier, who's been a funder for the Build Shift team, and also a technical resource to our policy concept and working with Build Shift. And so what they really identified as building performance standards for existing buildings being the most powerful policy tool that's available. And I'll describe a little bit of what that looks like. We'll dive into this more over time, but it's generally when we think about like, okay, we're looking at to 2050, that's a long timeline, and we want to get to zero carbon emissions. Some buildings like Building C here is, that would be like the June Key Delta Community Center. They don't really need to do much, just maintain where they're at to continue to be zero carbon emissions. And then we have some energy efficient buildings like Building B that won't have to go as far to get to zero emissions, but we need to get started sooner than later. We can't just simply wait to 2050. We need to start making progress sooner. So the idea is to have interim standards that phase in. In this example, it's a 10-year timeline just for policy concept idea, but we would want to talk about what that interim period may be with you all. And then Building A here would be a low performer. So maybe the Building A doesn't, we'll talk about these options too, but maybe Building A doesn't have to jump all the way to where Building B is in its first standard, but over time, we would see them get to zero. So making some more significant progress than the more energy efficient buildings. So that's kind of in concept. One reason why IMT recommends this type of performance standard is that it doesn't say like everybody follow the same prescriptive things. Like when I started doing this work 12 years ago at the city, we were considering for existing buildings, should we have everybody switch over to LED lighting? That doesn't make sense in all applications. And it's almost like every building, especially commercial buildings, it's its own unicorn. And so trying to apply the same idea or the same retrofit to everyone, it doesn't necessarily make sense. And there's cost implications. And so with a performance standard, it's more saying get to the target of carbon emissions, but you can take the most cost-effective pathway to get there. And I'm sharing this in the context of carbon emissions because that's where the national work's been. In Portland, we're really going to bring this back to what about health, resilience, and temperature too, and where do they fit into this timeline and implementation. So with that, I would share one more slide here on process and a little bit of report back on the building working group this meeting. So we launched in February 28th. So thank you for those who attended that meeting. That was Commissioner Rubio kicking us off. And then we spent about a month really in recruitment. So I'm glad to see so many folks here. I'm really happy about the group we have right now to move forward in this working group. There's really 2 working groups that meet from March, in April and May. We want to go into June as well. And so there's a tenant working group that's intended for to focus on the impacts and the benefits to tenants. Then there's a building working group that's focused on the impacts on property owners. We would like to bring them both together on June 8th. And so I will be doing a follow-up calendar invite. That would be, I guess, more of an optional meeting. We would like to have your participation consistent through the tenant working group or somebody else from your that represents your organization. But then come together with the building working group, an opportunity to hear from each other. I would hope that would be in person and we could like break bread and have some lunch, watch some inspiring videos, and then talk about things like resources. What does the city need to provide? And there's some examples of that across these other cities too that we can refer to. And also workforce development, which has been really important to Derek's here from Leaders Become Legends. How do we really build the pipeline for Black and Brown folks to enter into the clean energy workforce? Okay, so that's the stakeholder engagement that is organizational stakeholders. There are some focus meetings that are happening on the side. So an example of that are campus energy systems for hospitals and universities that have one central system serves many buildings, because the building by building approach doesn't necessarily work for them. Labor unions, because again, thinking about workforce development and what's the impact on jobs here. Local government, and that's really the city, the county, and the state and metro with their own buildings that they own, walking the talk. Native American community, I mentioned earlier that NAIA chose not to participate in this process, but we are wanting to deeply engage with them, as well as other Native American organizations and tribes that are in Portland. So we are planning a separate track of engagement there on the standards. And then regulated affordable housing. We do have Housing Oregon and Home Forward involved in the building working group, but then we would like to come back to CDCs and developers of affordable housing in a separate engagement, probably 1 or 2 meetings after our group here in the building working group flesh out a bit of the policy concept. So then we are thinking there'll be some additional engagement. We want to come back to the Build Shift Collective to re-engage the community network that they have. Well, it includes the city as well as part of the Build Shift Collective, to re-engage the folks that we have connected with previously, to share here's how it's starting to look. Is it still representing your priorities? We also want to engage private property owners that would be impacted, and not just their organizational representatives. So we put all that together, form a draft ordinance we put out for public comment. I think the earliest idea is very end of summer and have that public comment run through September. And then at some point we read the politics. It is an election year, and we'd like to bring an ordinance to City Council for consideration. All right. So I do want to be able to answer some questions before I go there. Just as we go through these meetings together, we'd like you to hear what's happening in the building working group and their breakout discussions, and vice versa, for them to hear what's happening in your discussions. And so we asked 2 questions in the breakouts from the building working group. So they're meeting bi-weekly, offset from our meetings. They started last week, and they'll meet again this coming Wednesday. Some of you are in both places, especially if you're on the city resource team. So what do you want to spend your time on in these groups? What does the city need to know about your organization to make this policy work? So there is a list here. I did want to look at the, normally our other facilitator would share this, Marty Frank. She's not available today. And so I'm going to refer to her notes now as I stop sharing here, and I'll turn it back over to Irene. And let me just find those notes. Okay. All right, so big picture policy questions. There's a lot of questions about general aspects like who will write the policy. That will be Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Will there be a fee associated? Well, let's talk about that. How will compliance be assessed? We'll also talk about compliance in both groups. How will it work with other policies? And that's something else we can kind of learn from each other, what other policies are out there. But an example of that would be like the new construction regulated affordable housing policy for temperature limits, for instance, to protect against heat waves. We value both working groups equally. We are here to really understand perspectives of both tenants and property owners. So a lot of these questions will show up in both places. We had quite a bit of questions come around carbon and metrics, and so we'll define what we mean by zero carbon, net zero carbon. What do we mean by carbon emissions? It isn't just carbon. Next meeting or a future meeting. These are more like building owner centric, but what are the planning cycles that our folks are on, and have we considered that? And so we'll do that through the building working group. And then the resources I mentioned, so financial support, non-financial support, like technical assistance. There's a lot of interest in that. Big question that is hanging out there is could the Portland Clean Energy and Community Benefits Fund, or PSEF, help out with this? That is a potential source, but we also need to know that we have the Energy Trust of Oregon available with incentives, and we'll hear from them as well. And we also have federal funds that we're seeking to, as Nikita noted earlier, to make those investments into rental properties so that the cost of compliance for the building owner doesn't just simply get passed along as higher rents for tenants. So that's my recap. I'll turn it back over to you, Irene, for Q&A, and then we'll get to break and start out with our discussion groups.
Yeah, thank you, Vin and Nikita. Yeah, so we'll kind of have a little bit of time here for any questions or comments about the presentation. Does anyone have any questions that they have for the city staff team here or the resource team? Any questions we can answer? And feel free to raise your hand if you have using the reaction, if you'd like me to queue you up. Okay, I see Diane with a hand. Go ahead.
I guess I'm curious, the latest IPCC report has a lot of strategies in it, and they're also saying that things are happening much more rapidly than we thought. And originally this 2050 goal was based on state policies, and now both city and state policies are behind the 8 ball in terms of the rapidity with which this crisis is developing. And so I'm just curious, given, I understand the need for the kind of a long adaptation period, but it seems like at this point there's the end goals may not be what's needed. So I'm wondering if somebody can speak to that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak to that a bit, and let's continue that conversation, and we'll have some room within breakout groups to discuss that as well at future meetings. But I want to acknowledge what you're saying there is that 2050 might not be the time where we have to hit zero to prevent. I mean, if we have like these heat domes right now, in my conversation with the Oregon Climate Change Research Institute's executive director is like that was an anomaly. But as we've seen with flooding that's happened, like in Texas, they're having a 500-year flood 3 times every decade. And it's supposed to happen it's based on a 500-year time scale. So if we start seeing the impacts of climate change advance at that rate, I think that what we're setting up here with this policy is a organizational structure to get us to our targets, but we might have to move faster. And that's the important part of having that adaptation with the time period intervals, that maybe we can move faster. Like 10 years is probably not the right interval if we feel like we need to start moving a lot faster. The other thing we have to balance in there is the affordability of it too. And so we'll want to balance the cost with how fast we think we need to move. And if we have 3 heat domes in the next 10 years, I think we're all going to be feeling like we need to move a lot faster. And so it might be certain aspects of the standards that move faster on, like access to cooling. I'm just sharing one example of like how we might enter into some of these discussions, but really acknowledging like, yeah, that's the beauty of the adaptive system of performance target. It's not saying, well, we need to do this, everybody does the same lighting upgrade at the same time. It's more like, well, let's figure out like, how do we get to where we need to be, and we can move those time scales as needed.
Okay, we have a few questions in the chat here. One from Suzanne: how are we trying to align with public health strategies such as the Multnomah County Community Health Improvement Plan and the State Health Improvement Plan? Both of them address healthy communities as primary components.
Yeah, thank you. I think on the health side, we are looking forward to working with the organizations here who are here today. We also have Multnomah County engaged. Knowledge Murphy is part of the Build Shift team. Yeah, I don't know if Knowledge made it here today, but I know he's planning to be part of the tenant working group. We also have the county planning to be represented in the building working group. We have asked the health department to join. And I also want to acknowledge the work of the Coalition of Communities of Color that leads Build Shift and is also leading a climate health work with the county. And so I would invite Nikita, if there's anything you want to share on how you've been coordinating, or how CCC has been coordinating with the county.
Yeah, we've been coordinating, as been mentioned around, we've been coordinating with the health department or the health office around like EJ in like some sort of mapping tool to map environmental justice indicators, and sort of thinking about health equity and working with them very closely.
And we will have more discussions there too. Like this is one of the major focus areas.
Great, thanks. Okay, so a couple more questions here, and then I'd like to kind of move us towards a quick break before we go into small breakout. So if you have additional questions, feel free to ask them in the small breakouts as well. Okay, so next question here from Jayraj is, Vin, you mentioned that a quarter of our rental housing doesn't have AC. Is that Portland specific? Is that the city of Portland specific?
Yeah, that's Portland specific. So the Portland or PSEF looked at that for their heat response, and that's roughly where they landed, is about 25%.
And then Adele has another question about if whether the goal is an ordinance, as in law. So is it legally mandating?
Yeah, thank you, Adele. This is, I think, the importance of having this here right now is we have lots of resolutions at the city of Portland, like our climate action plan, our 100% renewable energy resolution, our climate emergency declaration. These are all resolutions that set goals that don't have much teeth to them. But what we're working on here is the development of an ordinance that will have teeth. So we would commit the city, it would take another ordinance by city council to remove us from meeting these targets. And so it would be enforceable by the city to make sure that we actually reduce the emissions and improve the health and affordability of housing for what the areas that intersect with climate issues. So it's a very significant ordinance that we're working on. It's the biggest in my career. The last one I worked on was the commercial energy reporting disclosure ordinance that passed in 2015. And that was really just kind of the beginning of starting to do this work. This is the actual work, I think, that brings us to addressing climate change for real.
Okay, and then last question that I have here before we move on. Do we have a sense of what percentage of current rental stock uses gas appliances or gas stoves?
That's a good question. And so we at the city, the data that we have from the natural gas company, it's the same that we get from the electric utilities, is the aggregate account consumption of natural gas or electricity. And it's broken down by commercial accounts, residential accounts, and industrial accounts. And that's very high level information of what we have. We have an estimate of natural gas that is based on regional estimates that come from the feds that we applied to that model I mentioned earlier. And I believe that is something like 40%. I'll share more on that in a future meeting, especially now that you've raised the question. But we do hope that, so Northwest Natural is represented here, and I know that there was some interest in sharing some on multifamily residential, the percent that's out there, which is different than single family residential too. So the other folks that are in the room that could help us out with this and thinking about future meetings is the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. So I would invite both Northwest Natural and the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, if you have those numbers at your fingertips, to go ahead and share that now.
Great. And then David had a related question of if we know the percent of rental units that have kitchen ventilation ducted to the outside.
Sorry, the percent of rental units that
have kitchen ventilation ducted to the outside.
I see. Yeah, we don't have that information, and so there's not currently a standard for that. So if we establish a standard, then we can actually learn and find out where the ventilation is. New construction does require ventilation. I started off with natural gas stoves, and now it's both because there's particulate matter emissions also from cooking food on electric stoves. There's now ventilation required more recently for both types of stoves, but we don't know where that who has it or who doesn't. I can tell you that my daughter, who rents an apartment, does not have it. So within my family, it's a 50%.
Okay, so well, if you have any other questions, feel free to add them in the chat while we break, and maybe we can come back to them here or after the break before we go into small breakout. But I'd like to give everybody a little bit of a breather, and feel free to take a break now. We'll come back here at 1:24. So a 4-minute break. If you need to get a glass of water, do a bathroom break, you can turn off your If you can turn off your video and mute yourself, that's great too. And we'll come back here at 1:24. Okay. If folks can maybe share your share your video real quick to let me know that you're there, or give a thumbs up with reactions, that'd be great. Thanks, David. Okay, so we have another, we have a couple questions, more questions in the chat, and been provided some responses to those. So just wanted to flag those for you all if you'd like to take a look in the chat box. So now we'd love to do a quick values exercise. We wanted to start with some, to just kind of see where people's values are related to climate change and the work that we're doing right now before we go into discussion. So I'm going to share my screen here. This is going to be kind of a live polling exercise. So give me a second here while this is set up. Okay, can everyone see that? Thumbs up.
Yep,
Okay.
looks good.
Great, thank you. All right, so I just wanted to just quickly, as a refresher, Nikita shared this earlier about some personal values that the community shared in a similar exercise in the first kickoff meeting with community members. So, so this is kind of what folks came up with, and we wanted to ask sort of a similar question and get your thoughts on sort of values that you bring or values that that are important to you in these HEART standards and this policy development. So just a couple instructions before we start. Wing here is gonna send you a link in the chat box. So if you click on that, it should take you to it should pose a question and some 3 boxes for you to sort of fill in what your values are for HEART standards. And if you're having any trouble or technical issues, please send us a message in the chat box. If that's not working for you, another option is to go to www.menti.com in your browser and use this code. And I'll see if I can copy this link here so you have it for this code. And you can do it that way as well. Okay, I'm seeing lots of hearts. Great. All right, so the question is, what values are important to bring to the HEART standards? So feel free to enter your values in here, and then you'll see it kind of pop up in the screen as a word cloud. I'll give you all about a minute here to add in your values.
Thank you, everyone. We'll refer back to these two as we start off future discussions in other meetings.
Okay, I'm seeing lots of great values in here. This is really cool to see this live as people enter them. The beauty of technology during COVID times.
Yeah, I want to thank Nikita too for developing this exercise for the Build Shift 2021 July community policy convenings. It's really a great tool.
Yeah, so I'm seeing health, community, and equity coming up a lot. So the more of those types of responses, the larger the text is. So seeing that as a big priority for folks. Safety, also seeing compassion. Resilience, also coming up. Energy efficiency, justice. So I'll give you another maybe 10 seconds here to add any other final thoughts. Affordability, dignity is coming up, racial equity.
Irene, it's still like expanding. Can we do an extension of 30 seconds here? I feel like it's like popcorn, you know, like you want to wait till it finally calms down and pull it out.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, we'll give you some extra time here. Yeah, climate resilience, affordability. Some other ones here that are coming up: child-centered, anti-displacement, engaging the unengaged, human-centered, utility justice. There's some other ideas that are popping up here.
I wanted to note too that there are many in the center of this word cloud that were in the center of the one that we had shared earlier from our community engagement workshop. So community equity and health. So really, really heartening to see some overlap in these word clouds around values.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm also seeing self-determination, protecting renters, just transition, vitality is also coming up, climate justice, climate resilience, embodied carbon. Great. Well, I'm kind of seeing it slow down here, so I think maybe I'll give folks another 10 seconds and then we'll close this out. But thank you all so much for participating in this. And it's really great to see that there's some, as Nikita said, some common values that that we're seeing amongst you all and other community members. So again, as Vinh mentioned, we'll be doing the same exercise with the building working group and kind of seeing commonalities between all participants in this process. Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna close this out. Thank you so much. And stop sharing my screen. And then we're gonna pivot over to small group discussions. And we'd love to hear from you in this in the second half of or really the next hour of this meeting. So before we break off, I'm going to share my screen again and would like Vinh to go over some ground rules before we break off, and then also kind of review what the discussion questions are and what we'd like to hear from you. Okay, so let me share my screen here, and then Vinh, you have the mic.
Great, thank you. So yeah, at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, as part of our equity journey, racial equity journey to become an anti-racist bureau, we developed these ground rules that I would like to share here too. And so the first one is listen to understand, not respond. Wait, why am I talking? Similarly, why am I not talking? I want to encourage folks to, if you are generally reserved or introverted, please do take the time to participate though, and our facilitators will do our best to make sure we hear from everyone. But if you're the type like me who kind of open processes as I talk, maybe restrain a little. I've tried to do that. Third one here, assume good intentions, but attend to impact. So if there is an ouch moment, really kind of respond to like where that person's out that was impacted, and but not, rather than being like, oh, I didn't mean to do that, but it's more like it happened, to acknowledge it and tend to that. 4, be willing to make mistakes and be forgiving to those who do. We hope that this will be a safe enough space that we can say things that are authentic and real, and at the same time in a way that is empathic, and hope that we can be authentic enough to be able to really understand each other in that way, speak our truth, but part of that is being forgiving in case we do make mistakes. And 5, allow for and appreciate disagreement of opinion, ideas, methods respectfully. This is the ethos of this whole work, is really to embrace diversity into the beginning to end of a policy process. So please bring that into your spaces. And then 6, personal stories stay, lessons can be learned. So what we mean there is that if I'm in a meeting and you come back and reporting back to other staff, I think it's certainly fine to say the city said this, said that, we are in public record, but other folks who are in the room to not say, well, actually Irene's kind of working for the city, I'm not going to include you. Who should I pick on here? Anjanette, my friend Anjanette, like, please don't say like Anjanette said this and Anjanette said that, but more like, here's what I learned from one of the folks that spoke within my discussion group. And so pass along those learnings and the lessons. All right, and then the film, the bank, Tony comes back to that, why am I not talking? And just please make space for all to be heard. So we have a limited amount of time right now. And so if you hear from a facilitator that, hey, we want to hear from other folks, please give up that space of your own speaking time. All right, thanks. Look forward to jumping into a discussion group with y'all.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Vin. All right, so we're gonna break out into small breakout rooms. We'll have about 40 minutes or so to discuss. So we'll come back to this main room at 2:15, and then we'll have about 10 minutes to do some reporting out and kind of go over some key takeaways and highlights that you all on any input that you provided during your discussion. Each group is going to have a facilitator. They will be Vin, Michelle, Dirk, and myself. And then once you're into your breakout rooms, we'll please introduce yourselves and with your names, pronouns, affiliations, maybe your experience a little bit, so you get kind of familiar with the folks in the small breakout. And then we'll come back together again in the main room at around 2:15. So the key questions that we have for you all is, one, what are the experiences that you, your community or organization are struggling with related to climate change? You know, what's showing up for you and the folks that you serve or the folks that are in your community. And so we kind of want to hear some lived experiences and share some stories of what's kind of coming up for communities in Portland. And then the second question is, what's exciting to you about the HEART standards? And also, what key concerns and priorities do you have? So we kind of want to get a sense of what's coming up for you related to these HEART standards and what's kind of a top priority. And so that we can sort of, and that'll kind of inform some subsequent meetings we'll have over the next couple of weeks. So appreciate everybody's input there. And then yeah, I'll ask Wayne to open up those rooms. So you'll see a little thing pop up that says to join a breakout room. If you click on, it should be like a little blue button.
Hi, Jordan. This is Wing with BPS. I'm doing tech support for the meeting. Everyone's in breakout sessions. Did you want to join one or do you want to hang out here? Hi.
Yeah, I actually got kicked out on accident.
Okay.
So if I could be put back in the great.
Which room?
I want to say it was group 2, perhaps.
Do you remember who your facilitator was?
I was with Vin.
Vin. Okay. I think it's group 1. Great.
Okay.
I'll put you in there.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Hopefully, I know we never have enough time for these discussions, and it takes a bit of time to get into it. So hopefully you all had a chance to have some provide your input here and share your thoughts. So in our last, maybe in the next 10 minutes or so, we'd love to do a report out. So what I'm gonna do is just kind of call out the facilitators, and maybe you all can share maybe in like two minutes or less, some key takeaways and any highlights that you want to share from your group. So I'm gonna start with Vinh, and then I'll go to Michelle.
Great, thanks. I will say that I'm not the best at kind of synthesizing very quickly. So we will come back and do this again in the synthesis before at the next meeting that we have to. But yeah, so on the first question, what are the experiences that you, your community, or your organization is struggling with related to climate change? One was just getting more knowledge, finding ways to fund the upfront cost of higher performance buildings, the heat dome and snowfall. Responding to the need to phase out fossil fuels in a way that doesn't cause other problems like reliability and affordability, how to balance all three of those. Dealing with misinformation and greenwashing, doing things that will address what IPCC is recommending to act rapidly. So not waiting too far out and hitting that low-hanging fruit every year to reduce emissions. Increasing the number of healthy and efficient carbon neutral buildings to where we're really bringing it up to where it's normal, kind of like up to scale across the city. And then the next one was, what's exciting to you about the HART standards? What key concerns and priorities do you have? And so one of them was, well, I think generally what we heard was all of them important, but equitable energy and anti-displacement stood out to one of our participants. There was a concern about the example for the H in the HART for natural gas supply and ventilation, when maybe we should not have natural gas at all, like some other cities that are doing that, or where natural gas companies are now switching to other sources of energy like geothermal in Vermont, to make sure we stay expansive in our vision, not get too narrow around specific technology. I heard a couple places is concerned about the trajectory going so far out to make sure we have concrete steps every year. There's some excitement for the co-benefits of health and anti-displacement affordability. And there was a concern though, and excitement for the broadness of all these different components together. And the concern is, like, one, it's exciting to get so much done at once, but the concern is there'll be too much and too ambitious and could collapse under its own weight. But yeah, generally excitement for the holistic approach. And then there was a couple of questions at the end too that we'll come back to in future meetings. So.
Great, thanks, Vinh. Michelle.
Yes, thank you, Vinh. I'm not going to be able to synopsize one common thought that came from our group either. So I'll just kind of go popcorn style on what I heard. So there's an understanding that this is an emerging issue, and some of the nonprofits in the room are concerned about how their constituents' sense of safety in terms of participating. Just participating, whether it's getting an air conditioner or talking to a landlord or whatever. We had another comment about a story about, having purchased a house in an area that had, not only industrial toxins and bad air quality, but also had family members that developed asthma as a result. If you have asthma, it's harder to show up to work every day sometimes, and it leads. We heard about the negative feedback loop that can occur when you're living in poverty and you're living in substandard housing, and you've got asthma, and your kids can't go to school, and you can't go to work. It makes it harder to get out of that cycle and afford housing that's cleaner and healthier. And so that was a poverty issue and an affordability issue. We heard from concern about having energy efficiency, having houses that are energy efficiency, but then those energy efficiency upgrades, you need to have the ventilation and the indoor air quality as a concern. depending on your mix of appliances, gas or electric. Let's see. We had some understanding about low-income weatherization and the importance of getting the information out to customers, utility customers, understanding how the energy burdens of low-income customers are great, and so wanting to be committed to working with those groups of people to bring more efficiency and lower costs. On question number 2 about the HART standards, we heard some optimism, which I really appreciate in climate circles. You don't hear about optimism very often, but we heard some optimism about this process that we're engaged in right now. In that slide that you showed that had the spectrum of engagement, that people that have had long-term experience working with the city and being members of advisory groups actually feel like are being heard and being able to be effective and being able to, we'll be able to see their input reflected in the final outcomes. And that's a change in how the city has done business with communities. We heard policy priority would be safe homes and testing, universal testing, and also a desire to be evidence-based in our decision-making. And we heard that anti-displacement was a big, in terms of the acronym for HART standards, was a guiding value and reason for being involved.
Great, thank you so much, Michelle. I'm gonna go to Dirk, and then I'll share out what our group said.
Everyone, yeah, I think my group echoed a lot of the same things. Someone had, on the first question, someone had a comment about the concerns over power outages, of course, smoke inhalation, impacting health, trying to prepare community for climate emergencies like resource hubs, problems that have existed for a long time that are maybe not related to climate change are only going to get worse and have gotten worse because of it. That was a concern. Affordability was something I heard a few times. Affordability makes people not want to turn on their air conditioning, so they may sit in their apartment and suffer. The loss of our land, why we're here in Oregon, right? Our trees, our rivers, and those kinds of things. Incentives are not enough, are often not enough. That was a concern as well. The split incentive problem, where we incentivize landlords, and then the landlord then raises the rent, and it exacerbates another problem. I think the second question, what's exciting to you about the HART standards? Excited that the health standards centered community. I heard that a few times from folks. I think people really appreciated that, and how holistic it was, and that resilience was a big part of the health standards. So not just centering it around mitigating carbon, but also around health impacts as well. Excited about the workforce development portion of the plan as well. That someone thought that was a key part of the issue, is creating jobs around climate action, and thought that was a really good thing to be focusing on. Yeah, I'll pass it to you, Irene.
Great, thanks, Dirk. Yeah, we talked about very similar things as well. So I just echo that on behalf of my group, what we talked about. Just some other things to highlight here. And, you know, I think the heat, we talked about the heat wave and how really that was really scary for a lot of people. And, you know, and it was really, not having AC available in your room or in your house, it was a matter of life and death. And so that, you know, a lot of experiences, particularly for BIPOC and marginalized populations, is especially very, very scary. And so around the question about kind of what was exciting, same for us, for our group as well, affordability is, it was great to see affordability and resilience in there, and also that the impact that this can have on on the workforce and making hope how the policy can provide opportunities for BIPOC community members and businesses to implement this policy. There's also ideas about how this interplays with HB 2020 and also the work that PSEF is doing right now. And then let's see what else is here. I think just additional information about appliance upgrades and what that looks like in the policy. So that might be good to cover in the next meeting more specifically. And just a note that California is also doing a lot of work around statewide appliances and smart enabled appliances and how that can impact some improvements there as well. So I think hopefully I covered everything, and we'll be sharing out these notes as well. So thank you all for your thoughts and bringing your ideas to the space. Really, really appreciate it. And then I will hand it off to Vinh to sort of provide some closing remarks and also talk about next steps.
Great. Thank you, Irene, and for holding the space today. I know it's a lot of work to get to this point, and really appreciate how you've really kept us together here in the space, and want to thank Wayne Grabowski, my longtime friend and colleague at Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, who has adapted to our need for virtual online meetings, and seamless. Wing, thank you. And then my other city colleagues that were here to help out with facilitation, Michelle and Dirk, that I know many of you know, or at least you know now through this process. And then the city resource teams from other bureaus and the utilities, or Energy Trust and NEA, our national partners at IMT. We really just appreciate this combined effort to make this happen right now and create this space. I'm looking forward. Already, it's just so rich to hear a lot of ideas and information and concerns. And we're going to dive deeper into some key decision points to help us refine this policy, and I hope that they'll stay with us. And if you can't be here personally, please do send to someone else. We'd like to have only one or two representatives per group, so we can have right now we have 4 facilitators. We're going to try out a 5th one here for the small groups, but to keep it manageable, 1 or 2 is just right. So we're going to digest what we heard in the small groups today, and then refine our agenda for the next 3 sessions. And we'll send out, or I'll send out the themes to be determined based on your feedback today, and the timing of how we approach it for these next 3 meetings. I'll send that out with a video recording from today and a slide deck. So if there are other folks that you think we should be talking to within your respective organizations, there'll be some resources you can determine who should be at which meeting. And then if you have any questions, do contact me by email. If you're on that large email chain that puts everybody together, you can kind of see who it's beyond this room, right? Like who else has been invited. Or actually, these are the folks not just invited. These are the folks who confirm they want to participate in this. Please don't reply all. It's a big group. And then the last thing is that we'll provide some more details on this proposed session number 5 to combine with the building working group. We wanted to read both the building and the tenant working groups first, and I think we're at I would say that's a go. So let me know if you're like, no, don't put us in with the building working group. On a side note here, reach out to me by email with what those concerns may be. But otherwise, I think we'll try to get folks together on June 8th, 12 to 2:30, and hit those big topics on workforce development that was mentioned today, and resource hubs that was also mentioned. All right, well, thank you, everyone. We're at 12:30, and we'll hope to see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Thank you all so much. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.